Okay, 3, 2, 1. Good evening again. Welcome everyone to the finance meeting for December 2021. We're going to go ahead and get started. And first up, we actually have a number of speakers joining us today, with one on Zoom. So I'm going to start with Luis Aponte. He's not here yet? Okay. Toyin Anderson, is she available on Zoom? Okay.
Hi, Toyin, can you hear us? Hi, Toyin, can you hear us? Ms. Anderson? Okay. Okay, Ms. Anderson, are you hearing us? Toyin? Okay, so we're gonna try and see if we can move on to the next speaker, and we'll come back to Ms. Anderson. Okay, if you could let in.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, you're here? Okay.
I'm here.
All
yes,
right.
I'm here.
Wonderful.
I don't know for some reason I couldn't hear you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Your Toyin is a parent. She's speaking on ARP and CARES Act dollars. All right, Toyin, whenever you're ready, you got 3 minutes.
All right, thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. As she said, my name is Toyin Anderson, and I currently have 2 children in our city school district. I wanted to talk this evening about our funding. As finances, pretty much should incorporate, how our money dollars are spent. So this evening, I want to talk more, like I've, talked in several different spaces, about some of the funding from our CARES Act that I want to see intentionally dedicated and devoted to our social and emotional support that could help our children. We have enough proof with what's going on with our children inside the buildings, outside the buildings, in the streets, at home. And they're crying, they're screaming, they're asking for us as the adults that's charged and responsible for taking care of them to help and provide that support that they so need, that we know that they so need. And it's time for us to respond as the district, like I said, the adults, the community that's responsible for cultivating what our children's futures and lives look like. They need social and emotional support. They need that. And I promise you, until we take care of those needs, we're going to continue to have issues. We have to, and as a parent, I want to see where we are dedicating these funds to help our children to better be able to learn, better capacity to concentrate, just to feel better about themselves and lives and the stuff that they've gone through, the trauma that they're still going through and experiencing. How can we, as the adults, like I said, that's charged, become responsible and responsive enough to provide what they need? Can we put it in writing as a parent? I would love to see it. I would love to be a part of the conversation that talks about it. I want to be a part of the team that figures out how to implement it. But we have to respond. We have to do what's right for our children and use some of this money and take care of those needs. That's what I want to say tonight. I hope we will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Toyin. We appreciate you addressing the board tonight. We're going to move on to our next speaker.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Valerie Smith. I believe Valerie is in person. Welcome, Valerie. Whenever you're ready, you can be here. You just need to turn on the mic. Okay, just press that button and when it's green. Thank you.
Does that sound okay? Yes. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you. My name is Valerie Smith. I am a Rochester community member and a board-certified behavior analyst at the University of Rochester's Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities. I'm here today as part of a coalition of parents, faith leaders, and community members that collected 548 signatures in support of expanding mental health services at Rochester City School District. As a behavior analyst, I've seen firsthand the research that shows that all human behavior is impacted by our environment, this complex, dynamic universe of events that differs from instance to instance. Everything from how we feel to what we experience has influence on our development, our communication, and our learning. When our children are experiencing daily harmful stimuli in their environment, violence, poverty, the effects of systemic racism, and now the extreme effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, they are experiencing negative consequences to their health that are detrimental to their ability to learn new skills. Positive change begins with creating a positive environment. This means focusing on inclusion and ensuring that students have access to trained RCSD staff who model restorative practices and foster a space grounded in trauma-informed care. Providing the mental health supports outlined in this petition is critical to student learning, healthy relationships, and safety. I believe that everyone is here tonight because we care about the well-being of our city's children. Let's show our children we care by implementing proactive interventions aimed to support them. I ask you that you please don't leave our kids behind and add the mental health supports we are asking for in this petition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Our next speaker is Sabrina Smith, who is also joining us in person. She's a community member also speaking on ARP and CARES Fund dollars.
Were before. Adverse childhood experiences have increased exponentially and are more damaging today due to their severity. Our children have the right to experience life as it should be during their most formidable years. As gatekeepers to the future of our city, we have a responsibility to the present to act now. The difference between 2017 and 2021 is the availability of resources. Today, there are resources available to change the trajectory of our future. This evening, I stand before you asking, with 448 parents and community members, that we give our children a gift of a bright, healthy future that allows them to transform our city into the vibrant city that it can be. Please don't leave our kids behind. They need mental health supports that we are asking for in this petition. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Our next speaker is Gail Harrison, a community member also speaking on our CARES Act dollars. Is Gail in the room? No? Okay. All right, we will move on to Gail Burks. There's two Gails. Welcome, Gail. Whenever you're ready. Of course. Whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes once you get to the podium.
Thank you.
Sure.
First of all, I want to say greetings to the board. I thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the BIPOC program and the Children's Agenda regarding the funding available through the ARPA. I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was growing up, I had a traumatic thing happen in my life. During the summer of 1970, my mom passed away. And when I went back to school, I thought everything was just good. Everything was fine. I was going through my classes. I wasn't a troublemaker, and so I passed, and I graduated. But then when I grew older, I was working at a job, and they gave us an opportunity to do some professional development. And when they did that, my supervisor asked me, "What do you want to work on?" And I said to her, "You know what, I have a problem with nouns, verbs, adjectives, spelling. It always holds me back from pushing forward because I got to look up every word, I got to spell, I got to know how to put the grammar marks and going on. So she said, okay, we'll let you go to Silver Learning Center. So when I went to Silver Learning Center, they let you do an assessment. And at that assessment, they try to find out where you fit and where they need to start you. So I took the test and I came back, and the lady called me in the office, and she sat me down in her chair, and she said to me, what happened to you this summer between your 5th grade and your 6th grade? And I told her, that was the year that my mom died. She said, from the test that we took, the assessment, we can pinpoint that you had a traumatic thing happen in your life. And at that point, you did not excel at the growing rate that you should have grown at. What you did was maintain and stayed at the same level. But I would have never known that if I hadn't went to that test, because I lived in a shelter of traumatic stuff that I didn't know that had affected me because my mom died. And now we living in 2021, and kids are having this traumatic feeling every day. They're from COVID, from violence. My daughter lives over on the south side, and I have been at her house when people are outside shooting, and my granddaughters and my kids, and we want them kids to grow up and not know that that's not traumatic. We need to have some help with the mental health system. We also need to make sure that the parents are getting the support that they need. No, I wasn't a bad kid. No, I didn't go to school and cause all the stuff. But what I did have was hidden traumatic things inside of me that stopped me from being who I need to be. So I ask you, consider when you're making your choice that we put mental health supports in there for the children and prayer for the family. That's my beeper telling me I'm through. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I have our last speaker, who is Carmen Torres, a community member who is also addressing the board on the topic of ARP and CARES Act dollars.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. My name is Carmen Torres. I am with the Children's Agenda. I am the Parent Advocate Coordinator for the Children's Agenda, right across the street. Today, I also wanted to talk about mental health. And first of all, as you see, I have a coalition of various folks, from parents to faith leaders to community members, that collected 548 petitions and signatures in support of expanding mental health in our schools. As you already know, COVID-19 has had a negative social and emotional impact on our students and our families. As if it were not enough, our city is under the state of emergency due to the continued growth on homicides, violence, and crime. We must ask ourselves, how are our students coping with the loss of a family member due to the homicidal deaths, incarceration of a family member who committed the crime, or even the COVID deaths? The continued negative environment our children are surrounded by is important enough to consider in investing in our children's mental well-being. We are aware that the needs of our children can be met with proper financial support or funding from what we know is ARPA. In other words, American Rescue Plan Act. We need to rescue our children at this point. The federal government gave us this money, so we need to use it wisely. Investing, as well as taking the recommendations in our 548 petitions that we haven't given you all of them just yet. We collected this, and our scholars and necessary support are desperately needed to be sure that we have covered all of their needs. There are 5 recommendations on there. I'm truly afraid that if something is not done now, we will only have more issues later. Let's take advantage of ARPA funding and ensure that we don't leave our children behind. I ask you to please add the mental health supports component we're asking for in this petition. I have also added a map of the most violent neighborhoods so that we may start processing the healing of one neighborhood at a time. Our children deserve that and much more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That does conclude our speakers portion of this evening. There were also 32 written comments that were submitted to the record on the topic of transportation and or urban-suburban transportation. That is it.
Thank you. There's actually 23 comments submitted for transportation, but there was 185 last week submitted around transportation as well. So, there's even more. So 32 speakers submitted information about transportation. And I just want to say to the folks that keep signing up to submit comments for public record around the issue around transportation that I hope that we do get some resolve for you all on this topic. I mean, that is like record numbers of comments that have been coming into the board, and I just want to make sure that you all know it doesn't go unnoticed. Before we get started, though, I do want to take a quick point of personal privilege and just give a shout out to our very own Anaya Simmons, who is our student board rep. Last Friday, on December 17th, School 58 held their senior march, and that's where the seniors go and mail their letters of intent to colleges, and they march down to City Hall. And our own Anaya Simmons was a part of that, and I just want to give her a shout out. And I know she's not here tonight, but I hope she's listening, and hopefully she'll be listening. She'll be here Thursday with us. But I just want to give her a shout out because Anaya is an amazing student for us and has done so much for the Rochester City School District, and as an advocate herself. We just want to say thank you and congratulations, and we appreciate you. So with that, can I get a motion for the minutes from the October 19, 2021 Finance Cow?
So moved. Second.
Kali, you got those? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioner Adams. The online voting system is open for votes.
Okay, you got everyone's vote? Okay, next up is the financial resolution reviews for January 2022. And I know that there were some kind of, I don't want to say issues, but some concerns and questions that came up in previews. And I believe Rebecca, our parent rep, is on Zoom today too.
Yes.
Yeah, because she's not feeling well, but if she has any questions, can we see if her hands are raised? Okay. Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. Looks like for number 8, I'm just wondering about there were 2 different budget codes listed on one of the first ones, I think under A. And then there was also another one that said A and B. I'm wondering about the numbers and what that corresponds to. I'll try to be more specific here. So I think it was number 8A, the Crisis Prevention Institute Turnkey Instructors. I just wanted to know why there were 2 different budget codes. And then that's on the first page and the second page. But then further down, it said 8B, And under, hold on. Well, I guess the first question would just be, why are there two budget codes, and what does that mean?
I just want to confirm, you said 8A?
8A, the Crisis Prevention Institute Turnkey Instructors. I just want to know what those correspond to, those budget codes, and why are there two different ones?
Okay, I'm scrolling.
The first and second page.
Why are these listed this way as opposed to, where's the rest?
The resolution, Crisis Prevention Institute Turnkey Instructors, it is number 8A. Resolution number hasn't yet been assigned, so it's number 8A.
Okay.
For the dollar amount, $73,980. And the question is regarding the budget code.
Yes. Thank you. And just as we wait, the second part of that question that I had was, how scalable do we envision this program district-wide?
The budget codes are on the screen.
Good evening, Commissioners. Happy holidays, everybody. Caroline and I are going to tag team this one. My apologies, I couldn't hear you very well in the back, so when you said crisis prevention, so the two different budget codes, Caroline can provide the clarity on why that is from a financial perspective, and if they have follow-up questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you.
As it involves grants, there's a way of breaking up the grants so that there's a portion that we are allowed to charge indirect costs back or give the allowance back to the district for indirect costs. So anything above in that amount is not allowable, so split into two separate codes. So that's why you have the difference there. It's the same purpose, it's just a distinction in the code as far as what can be attributed to indirect costs.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the second part of my question then is just how scalable, I don't know who would answer this, but how scalable do we envision this program district-wide and the longevity of this program?
So right now, excuse me, right now we're going to be working with our SSOs directly and our SSO leads in the building. Our plan to just deploy SSOs in every single building, and then from there we'll branch it out and grow it into our teacher ranks, our support staff ranks, and our administrative ranks. But right now the focus is on our direct security support personnel.
Okay, so the vision for this then would be a long-term investment?
That's our hope, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I actually have to clarify, though, because that's not what I recall Shepard saying in financial previews. So I just want to be clear, because this resolution is going to come up with teachers, and it's going to be labeled differently for this grant. So I know you just said SSOs, but my understanding, this is a train-the-trainer, and that there were going to be educators also
Absolutely.
trained, but you just said just SSOs. So I just want to be clear, because it's going to come up again. And I know that you were not able to make it at the finance previews, but we called Shepard in because we had questions around these particular resolutions,
Absolutely.
Mike. So, because when we go down, if you look at 8C, that is coded differently too, because there's a counselor there, then there was a teacher that is going to show up again. Actually, there was a few teachers that were on the resolutions.
For clarifying purposes, if we'd like to present that in the question log in writing, we can actually document it all, so then it's clear, so we're not kind of comparing multiple meetings, because like I said, I don't want to speak for Jim.
So I just want to, on record, because you just said to Commissioner Malloy that it was SSOs, but there are also educators and counselors who are on these resolutions under those grants that are going to be going through the training. I just want that on record. I just wanted accuracy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I do have some other questions, but I want to give other people an opportunity if we're taking turns. Okay, thank you. I guess the second one of my second questions is just for Resolution B. It's the additional pay for the Learning Technology Grant and Information Management Technology. There are two authorizations listed here, A and B, for a number of teachers. And when I scroll down to where it said A plus B, the total spending was $125,300, but then it said the certified budget line balance was to be decided or to be determined. why isn't there a certified budget line balance there? Thank you.
So I don't know who can answer this, but I will just add that these are early resolutions, so these are not finals. These are really our process that Dr. Jallo also recommended that we start doing. So whatever's certified today on these resolutions is going to be invalid a month from now when we actually vote on these.
Okay.
So I don't know what finance is going to give as an answer, but even if they had a certified number here today, that number would be invalid in 4 weeks.
But it'll be there 4 weeks from now then, when we vote on it.
It would be an invalid number if they went in and spent. So I would prefer personally that there's an accurate number right before we vote, which they have mentioned that it's difficult for them to do anyway. But, so I just want to put that out there because this has come up around that certified budget line item. There's no way for us to even know that, but
Okay.
but I don't know who wants to answer that from the administration. I'm just saying this has come up before around certified budget line items.
Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner LeBron is correct. Commissioner Malloy, because of the accuracy issues in providing certified budget lines at the onset of the resolution process, which is 6 weeks before you would consider it, we hold off until the resolutions are ready to be processed and go,
Okay.
so that you have the most accurate information.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Malloy, do you have any additional questions?
I do.
Okay.
For our number 8K, let me scroll down. Sorry, I have to scroll on my page as well. Okay, so this was additional pay, an additional pay resolution for coordinators of the supplemental funds. It's page 23 of 38. How long do we expect these individuals to serve in these positions? And is there a possibility of an extension on these positions?
Good evening. These positions are already part of the ARP-CRSA allocation, so they will be on board as long as the ARP-CRSA is in effect. However, what you're seeing in front of you are a request for authorization for extra funds during the break times so that these individuals are able to be on staff and working during those times when typically they would not necessarily be able to be present.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That answers that. And then if number 8L, this is the additional pay for curriculum planning and professional development. I just wanted to say that it's great to see this already starting so early, that we have, we're taking into consideration summer learning, and just wanted to say thanks for that. Last question would be number 8P. Okay, I just wanted to have more information about the EL Learning Company. Does that stand for Expeditionary Learning? And if I could just get a little more information, what does that entail? And I think the 2-line, that has been answered already, but I just want a little more information about this particular, it was my understanding that teachers have already been trained in EL at the school, or is this just extended training? I also know there are a lot of new teachers at that school who might need that training.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, it's exactly what it's for. There has been a lot of turnover in teaching staff at School 58, and this is to ensure that they're up on EL practices. In conversation with School 58, believe it or not, there are only a few that have been there throughout. I think they're down to like 8 teachers that had the original training for EL.
Okay, I know there had been concerns about that, so that's good to see. Thank you so much. Final question would be 8Q. which is on page 34. It's a budget transfer in the amount of over $5 million. I'd like a little more information about what this budget transfer is for. It's the CARES transfer, but for what?
Good evening. This is simply a reclassification of benefits to capture the subclass of CARES, so we can claim the benefits related to the FTEs and the individuals that are being claimed under CARES currently.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Tag along to that. The accompanying documentation uses the abbreviation, the acronym GER, GEAR, Counselor. Can you explain what that acronym
GEAR
stands
is a subclass of CARES.
Can you define the acronym for me?
I don't actually know what GEAR is off the top of my head.
If we could add that to the question log, thank you.
Yeah, sure. We can get that to you.
Thank you.
It's one of the two subclasses of CARES.
All right, President White.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Just a couple quick and general questions regarding the prevention and intervention strategies described on pages 20 and 27. As is often the case with prevention and intervention, it is hard to gauge the impact of these types of investments, and quite often they are subject to criticism, particularly from the right, that they are not cost effective and that they are for namby-pamby liberals. How, in light of this history of criticisms for these types of programs, intervention and prevention strategies, again, Madam Superintendent, I'm referring to the Crime Prevention Institute on page 20 and the Stop the Violence grant, which is on page 27. These are basically professional development opportunities that are attempting to engage our staff in the understanding and effective implementation of prevention and intervention strategies. Again, my experience over many years tells me that these types of programs are often criticized because you can't measure what you prevent. How, generally speaking, if you want to answer this through the question log, that's fine. How, but I think that the public would appreciate hearing some conversation about this. Given the sizable investment that we make in these kind of strategies, and I think legitimate, by the way, how does your team intend on assessing the effectiveness of these types of programs, particularly since many of them are professional development? So how do you measure that, the number of reduced violent disruptive incidences in schools? How do you intend on measuring the effectiveness of these investments?
I can start it, and then I'll ask Dr. Morris if she'll tag team with me. I think that's the power of us being able to create a robust research and evaluation team where we can look at it both quantitatively and qualitatively. So when you look at professional development, you look at where people were in particular areas before and then after. You can get small focus groups together and have people have conversations about their ability to, interrupt violence, to see it, to hopefully thwart it. But I would think, and I don't know what Dr. Morris and her team have looked at as of yet, they'll put together a plan that shows it very explicitly. But you look at it through those two lenses to see overall, like what happened before, what happened afterwards, and then where individuals fall.
Good evening. I'm never sure if this is coming on. So yes, you're absolutely right. So some of the research methodologies and the research approaches that the accountability department is starting to design in response to trying to do cost-benefit analysis is looking at a pre and a post, looking at the conditions of the school and discipline and other areas such as academic performance, looking at that before you do the professional development, and then starting to measure the effect after the professional development. And so as part of particularly the ARP and CURSA dollars, that is a huge component where when we're implementing programs like this, we're trying to be very thoughtful about how we design evaluation of the use of that money to ensure that there's an effect and the effect that we're intending to have on the school and the students.
Just a follow-up question. In the rush to try to make sure that these funds are appropriately used, I have seen in the past people not really projecting into the future in terms of how you might evaluate. So my next question is, or two follow-up questions, Madam Chairperson. One is, how do you intend on having the staff that will provide, I mean, we're hiring people to train, contractors, it appears, to train people on these very important intervention and prevention strategies. But this research piece that you're talking about, this follow-up, is really substantive, and it requires a lot of staffing hours. Have we allocated dollars to beef up, if you will, our research division so that they can do that? And then let me just throw this bit of a suggestion. We used to talk about years ago, when we talked about violence prevention and intervention, we talked about making sure that we understood if people are appropriately trained, you would see, for example, a reduction in the number of employees who called for a reduction in the number of employees who had sick leave. When we were measuring the reduction in violence in our schools years ago, that was one of the indicia of success. How many fewer employees were asking for time off because, so I would throw that little indicator in there that you might want to look at, but I'm really interested in making sure that we're spending, and I know that there's been a directive that we not use this money to increase our financial liabilities over the long haul, so don't hire permanent employees, do grants like this. But the problem with that is that you're going to need longitudinal studies about the impact of this. So I'm wondering how you're reconciling the need to be frugal and just hire based on these grants, but understanding that really appreciating the impact or the lack of impact of these kinds of programs really requires intense man or people power, and it has to be done over the long haul. What's the plan for that?
So thank you for asking that. We were very thoughtful with the design for our evaluation plan for ARP and CURSA, and part of it is that we hired 4 psychometricians, so we're beefing up the psychometric arm of research for the district. So 2 of those psychometric staff are going to be grant funded and not ARP or CURSA funded, so they will be on staff beyond the grant, but we do have 2 that are being brought on that are specifically supporting the evaluation of ARP and CURSA. Additionally, what we're doing, so beyond building sustainability and capacity within that arm of the department, another thing that we're doing is that we're contracting with large-scale evaluation vendors. So we want to have that large longitudinal, larger scale evaluation study element to be done by these larger companies that do this for a living. So they will do those large scale evaluations of things such as how did this particular program affect the entire district based on specific elements that we identify. So we have the smaller scale evaluations that can be done quickly and effectively by that psychometric arm that we're building within the accountability department. And then we're also contracting with that larger arm to do those larger scale evaluation approaches. And that's also in alignment with the recommendations from the Council of Great City Schools, who recommended doing that partnership between the evaluation vendors that have experience in this and also building the capacity within.
Thank you. Our parent rep, Rebecca Harrington, has her hand up.
Hi, thank you. I actually had a question on the very first resolution. I wasn't sure why there isn't a local company that was chosen for this. it's a crisis intervention. I'm not sure if it's crisis intervention training or.
Rebecca, Mike is making his way up from the back to come answer your question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, Ms. Heatherton. I will look into that process in terms of the vendor being selected and get back to the board in regards to the details.
Rebecca, did you hear that?
I did.
Okay.
I just think an emphasis on having someone local that understands our students and what our students are going through, and having such a wealth of crisis intervention programs and things in the local area might just be more beneficial to our students. And the other question that I had was, some of these are grant funded through SRSA or ARP money, but there's no easy designation to be able to tell, where the money is coming from. And I was wondering if there is a plan for that, just because it's going to get very confusing very quickly to try to figure out which is coming from permanent requests and resolutions and things that are temporary through this grant funded money.
Well, thank you for that, because you're going to segue me right into my comments, Rebecca. So, Rebecca, my comments have to do with the same sort of thinking for this board as we move forward into the new year, is thinking about how we are going to direct the administration to give us these resolutions for ARP and cursor in a different way than just blending them in with the regular resolutions. Because one, it will be difficult for all of us as board members to track that. And two, we should be able to pull that up separately, even on board docs, if we were to type in, ARP and pull up that information versus it being blended this way. The other thing I asked for in previews, and again, this is a conversation for the board starting in January as we move forward, is a way to track who is all being brought into the district under these dollars and having that list separate, so that as those dollars run out, we are not using grant-funded, temporary funded positions, and then suddenly those positions are now hardline positions. And that then becomes a long-term expenditure for this district that we didn't anticipate, especially as some of these positions are being created in particularly to these dollars. And some of them I won't be supporting, but the plan's already been approved. So I still believe that we do need to have a separate way to identify them, identify the folks that are hired under them, and have a different way to track those resolutions and those expenditures. So it'll be up for discussion at the next finance meeting. I just want to give you all a heads up now. I know it's the holiday. So are there any other questions on the January preview packet? I think that there will be changes. Like I said in previews, there were some issues and some errors with these resolutions. So I do anticipate that in January, those things would be resolved by then, by the time we vote on them. And you may have additional questions as January comes up. So none for now, so we're going to move on to the next item, and that is the review and the discussion of the financial reports, the November 2021 unaudited financial report and trend analysis, our charter school report, and our 21-22 first quarter student funds presented by our CFO, Carlene Pierce.
Good evening again, everyone. Okay, so if we get started, this evening, we're not going to start where we normally start, and that being on the cash flow projection page. And the reason I want to do that is because when we had a meeting a couple meetings ago, there was discussion that came up regarding trial balance and whether the trial balance was included within our financials or not. So Callie, if you can go down a little bit more and keep going to the first spreadsheet. Okay. One more page. There you go. On this particular document, what you have is this is the cash balance and general ledger summary. And so when the discussion came up, are we being shown trial balance figures or not? This is a document that has been required for a number of years. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was actually by the OSC, possibly at the time of the 5-point plan back in 2009. I could be mistaken, but it's been some time that districts have been required to show this document as part of their financial packages to their boards. If you take a look at that document, and Callie, if you can just scroll down just a little bit further where it says subtotal, it's towards the bottom. So where it says subtotal, in that very first column, I'm going to try and combine this sheet in with the next sheet that I typically start with. So in your first column, you're going to have the beginning trial balance. That first column line that is shown there actually ties right into, if you go to the next spreadsheet, it ties right into the blue number at the top of that spreadsheet. If you go back now, Callie, and I'm sorry for flipping back and forth, I just want to show the correlation for folks as to where the numbers are coming from. Next column over, I will call that the yellow column. That ties into the yellow highlighted number on the next spreadsheet. Going back, the next column over is going to be the pink highlighted item on the next spreadsheet. And then the very last one is going to be the green. It's going to be 2 columns over, and that ties into that ending balance for the trial balance. So as the discussion was coming up regarding cash positioning and trial balance, that's what I was just trying to show here, is that the trial balance then, which trial balance by definition is the showing, if you will, of all, it starts with your beginning balance. You add to it all of the money coming into the district in easiest terms, the receipts, the deposits. You then subtract out all the disbursements, meaning all the money going out of the district. And then you have the ending balance for that period. So in this particular case, for the month of November, from the start to the end, you have the movement of money within the trial balance. Now, is there another trial balance report? Yes, there is. There's another trial balance report that gets into all of the detail within the general ledger codes. And that's every single absolute debit and credit that's going through for a particular period of time. In this particular period, when we just pulled up the summary report for that, that particular report is 14 pages long. And I strongly encourage you that if you decide to go that route when the Finance Committee decides to take a look at the reports you'd like to have in the packages moving forward, that we all undergo some professional development to fully understand that report, because it could be a little bit confusing. But again, the trial balance as requested, or the cash trial balance as requested and required, is being presented to the board in that general ledger summary. So I'm hoping that that clears up any confusion.
CFO Pierce, Vice President Elliott has a question.
I just wanted to, because there seems to be some discrepancy, I guess I want to hear from Commissioner Powell. Is she talking about something that's different from what we're seeing here?
Thank you for that opportunity, Vice President Elliott. The dilemma here is that the trial balance only shows total cash values. It's a cash trial balance.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't separate out the committed funds and the assigned funds by their fund name, so that we can be assured that the funds that are assigned and show in our year-end balance are continuing to exist at those levels. Mm-hmm. That was the basis for my question. I appreciate the detailed answer you're giving today, but it doesn't get to the bottom line of knowing how much cash we have on hand does not tell us as a board that the funds that we set aside still exist in those fund designations.
And what I was trying to say is that I appreciate what you're saying, and if you need something, if the board decides there's something in more detail that is needed to be added to the packet, we have the absolute respect for all of you to submit the reports that you are looking for in your financial packet. Make sure that you have. All that I'm suggesting is that because of the complexity of the report, and understanding your fiduciary responsibility as board members and all taking that very seriously, that we all collectively undergo some professional development to understand how those reports look, what they are telling us, so that then you can make your determinations. So I appreciate your comment as well.
If I might follow up on that, the annual financial reports present the trial balance in 2 pages. So if it could be abbreviated for us on a monthly or quarterly basis in the same way that it's presented to the public in our year-end financials, that would certainly meet the needs of this board in order to see that the funds continue to exist, they haven't been dispersed or dissolved, and if they have, that we would be able to ask the question, what happened to it?
So thank you, Carlene. I just want to add, though, that the board has not made a decision on what the reports are going to look like, and I think that that could be something that we add to the agenda for a future finance meeting to look at what's on our reports and whether we need that level of detail. Personally, at this point, I'm comfortable with this. I also know that at any point, if I have additional questions, I can always submit to the question log or email the superintendent or the CFO. That's open to all board members as well. So the board has not decided on that, so I do not want you and your team to feel like you have to go do print 14 pages and figure out how you're going to educate us on how to read that report, because we as a board collectively have not decided, but certainly am open to putting it on the agenda to have a full discussion on public record. Yes, Vice President Elliott.
So Carlene, with regard to Commissioner Powell's I don't want to use the term concern, but ask, I should put it that way. What is that trying to address, I guess is the question that I have, and maybe I wasn't listening to it. But what is your question getting to? What is your ask getting to, and what would that provide the board with?
Right. If you'll recall our conversation with the external auditor, she described that the assigned funds are something that the administration can disperse according to the purpose for which it was established, and can be dissolved when it is decided that that fund is no longer needed. Well, the question is, who gets to decide when it's no longer needed? And a prime example of that is the transportation fund. You will see in the year-end trial balance in our annual financial report, that's no longer exists as an assigned fund. But it could be argued by anybody that we continue to have need for a transportation fund, given that our revenues this year are not going to meet our expenses. So if you'll recall, the auditor's response was, this is a matter of communication. Well, how best do we communicate between the administration and the board? By way of reports. That is the mechanism by which we communicate. And if when there's a disbursement from the fund balances, then if it were part of the summary report that we get in our monthly packets, and the explanation is reasonable, we have no reason to question. But if it were something, for instance, like dissolving the school lunch fund, that's another matter entirely, because we actually need that as on an ongoing basis when our revenues, expected revenues, don't match our expected expenses.
So nothing in our policy is addressing, at this point, is addressing what you're speaking to?
Precisely. There are no reports that target this concern precisely. There's nothing in our existing policy that targets this concern precisely. And so the need for future conversation exists. Yes, thank you.
I do have a follow-up to that, if I might.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
And then
So the only place that you will see transportation spelled out was in the 1920 year-end report. And it was spelled out to say that X number of dollars was being allocated to transportation. That report, as you know, is done when we're closing out the books for that year. The concern was that when that information then came forward into the 2021 annual report, it wasn't identified by that same line item. So a couple of things to think about there. We're not required to put a specific title to something like transportation. We did in 1920. It was not done in 1920 and then 2021. There's nothing wrong in doing that. I can appreciate what Commissioner Powell is saying, but most districts just say that the money is assigned for, it's just assigned. It's assigned to however it can be best utilized to fill a gap if needed. So if you take a look back through all of the budget documents, and we've done this to make sure that we're accurate in what we're saying here, there was not a single time that transportation definition was brought into the budget. We had a budget gap of $33.1 million. We needed to fill that gap. So that allocation was absolutely allowable to fill the gap by utilization of those funds, and that's what our external auditor, Ms. Barrett, was saying. So moving forward, I appreciate, again, the concerns because I think it gives us a different lens in which to look at the perception that the public may have or the thought process that funds disappeared. There haven't been any funds that have disappeared. It was just a change in terminology. And to Commissioner Powell's very point, we do need to get back to the fund balance because I think that fund balance policy is going to turn all of our hair gray. As we go through it, it's very complicated, and we need to do something with it to make sure it is usable and that we all understand it. Even the auditor was saying that it is difficult to interpret the true intention, which is fair, and we all need something to work with that we all understand in the same language.
President White?
Yeah, just to, like Vice President Elliott, I'm trying to get an understanding. And how I'm going to attempt to do that is try, Commissioner Powell, to describe what I think you're saying. And if I'm not doing it correctly, then I'm sure you will correct me. Essentially, I think what you're saying is you want to make sure that what we see is what we got, right? And you, I see you're nodding your head, and you believe that even in these quarterly reports, that there may be some real debits, for lack of a better word, against those dollars that we're not seeing on the quarterly reports, that we do see in the year-end reports. So the goal, and I won't be around to have this discussion, and I appreciate Chairperson LeBron saying that she'll put this on the agenda for future conversation, but I do think you are right. As fiduciary agents, we should see in real time on a quarterly basis, even if it means, I don't know that you have to repeat everything that you're referring to, Ms. Pierce, because as Commissioner Powell says and reminds us, in the year-end reports, it can be nestled down to 2 pages. And it may not even need all that, but I think it is fair as fiduciary agents to understand that the number that you see has perhaps additional encumbrances on it that the board ought to be informed of. I think that's what I hear. Now, if I'm not right in that assessment, then I'm sure somebody here, Commissioner Powell, Ms. Pierce will correct me, but essentially, in layperson's terms, what we see is not necessarily what we got. And we ought to know what that number is. Not perfectly, but better than I think what Commissioner Powell is saying is reflected in the quarterly reports. Do I have that right?
I think you did a great job, and I'm not trying to rehash history. I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that the history of the 2021 and the 1920 annual reports has identified a weakness. I'm not saying that we need to linger on it, but having identified that weakness, I think that we have an obligation to correct that with proper reporting and oversight.
I think too that we have to be careful when we're saying weakness, because there wasn't a weakness identified by the auditor, which is very important. It may be an area in which the board would like to improve upon from a terminology standpoint, but a financial weakness was not identified by the external auditor.
So, yeah, so with the recommendation for professional development, I'm not sure exactly what that entails. I know that I would like for it to entail around fund balances and what that means in
Absolutely.
transferring funds to that. So I would be interested in that kind of professional development.
Absolutely, and the OSC just did a wonderful presentation on fund balance, I think it was last month, and I would be happy to send that out to you. So you
Please.
can take it at your own time and watch the video, but then I would recommend that our external auditor or whomever you would deem necessary would come in and go over the topic again, because it can be confusing to people. And again, when we take the questions away, we take the mystery away, and it only allows us to build trust with each other, and that's so desperately needed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, before you move on, Carlene, I just want to say, like, this conversation is being had with, like, no actual evidence or proof that there's any misguidance or misdoing from the district. And I just think it's important to put that on record. The other piece is that this practice has, thank you for clarifying that it was not that we were, I'd say dinged, if you will, by the external auditor, as we had with transportation as an actual under expenditure, special education that we under budgeted for and, over planned and under budgeted. Charter school enrollment that we under budgeted for. Those were things that we were cited for actually not doing correctly and also costing the district, essentially leading towards the deficit. And all of this, without these reports, have been done for decades in this district. To bring it up now when we are actually, for the first time in a long time, at least financially stable. Again, I will bring it up in the future and put it on for a future conversation, but I just want to be clear that the information is in these packets, and again, that the auditor did not cite us as having done something incorrectly or the district done something incorrectly at this time. Thank you.
If we're ready to move on to the next page.
Actually, we're not.
Okay.
Yes, we are, because I'm not
I'm sorry.
calling on the speaker. I'm calling on the CFO to continue. Thank you.
I
am not recognizing you to
Madam
speak at this
Superintendent,
point.
might I
I'm
ask-
not recognizing you, Commissioner Powell,
Oh,
to
and you're
speak
not
at
going
this
to
point.
recognize the superintendent either when I ask a question of the superintendent?
No, I'm not recognizing you. At this very moment, I'm going to have the CFO continue, and then if there are questions
But
after she's done and you want to ask the question, I will
You're
call on you.
You're aware that our bylaws and our standards of conduct require that you give every opportunity for board members to ask questions.
If I call
It's-
on you, that is
only if I get called on.
part of
I see.
Robert's rules. If I call on you, I'm not acknowledging to call on you at this moment, so you can continue, CFO.
But our standards require that we
I've
treat each other
allowed
with
you to
respect.
speak without being called on as the chair multiple times. You've spoken out of turn multiple times. I didn't call on you. You just spoke. You and Commissioner Malloy had a whole little sidebar there. She allowed you to speak. The vice president looked at you and you was like, thank you, like she acknowledged you to speak and she's not the chair. I allowed those things to go on. I am not acknowledging her at this moment. As the chair of the meeting, I'm asking the CFO to continue and we can take questions at the end of her
I'm
presentation.
sorry, but if the vice president has yielded her time with a specific question to another board member, I think that's entirely appropriate and within the bylaws. I wouldn't have said one word if Commissioner Elliott hadn't asked me a specific question. My only
acknowledged
point.
you, but
No, she specifically
Adrian,
asked
go
me a
ahead.
question.
Okay, I'm gonna make a ruling as a parliamentarian. The open meetings law and the board bylaws favor open deliberation, but the chair does have to recognize you for you to make further comments. If the time was yielded by the vice president, then I think Commissioner Powell should have some time to speak.
Yes, but that was earlier, so that was already done. That's what I was referring to, that she spoke out of term when Vice President Elliott had the gavel, if you will, they're speaking. So at this point, I'm not acknowledging her. I'm asking for our CFO to continue, and then I will take questions at the end of her presentation. Thank you, legal.
Point of order, the parliamentarian makes final decisions on the process of the meeting. That is in our bylaws, not the chair, the parliamentarian. He's
And
made a
he
ruling.
did, and he just said that I was in the right in this, as the chair.
Commissioner Powell, have you finished your comments?
She was not recognized by Vice President Elliott. That was earlier in this conversation. That's what I'm trying to clarify. Vice President Elliott was not speaking and did not give her the look, the nod, or anything. That was previously to this.
I understand. Commissioner Powell, did you finish your comments?
I have one thing to say, and only
Thank
one
you.
thing to
Please
say.
make your comments.
All right. Everything that Carlene said was perfectly fine, and I was perfectly acceptable, but then Chairperson LeBron indicated that everything we have is in these reports, and that is simply not a true statement. We do not see, looking at the cash trial balance, what the assigned and committed fund balances are, and therefore cannot look at those and say, they have not changed. We cannot do that because we do not have that information, and I just want to say that that last statement that Commissioner LeBron made was patently on its face incorrect. Thank you.
And so I just want to clarify for our legal that Vice President Elliott was not speaking at this time and did not give her the gavel to speak or give her the nod to speak, that happened a few minutes ago. And if you go back on the record and review the tape, you will see that Vice President Elliott was not speaking and it was not her turn. Our CFO started talking and then she wanted to add further comments after I spoke. I just want to put that out there because that was an incorrect process that you just gave. So with that said, I'm going to ask the CFO to continue, and if you would like to respond to that comment, you're more than welcome to, and if you not, if you want to continue, that is your choice.
I would just like to continue. Thank you. Thank you. So if we take a look at the normal cash flow projection report where we typically start our meetings, you're going to see we're holding our own at about 56 million. It's pretty favorable in comparison to last year when you take into consideration we do not have the RAN again, and I will continue to say that because that RAN last year of 86 million did make a difference. However, I will say if we can move to the next graph, please. Once again, please keep your eye on where the trends are going with our liquid cash flow in this visual format. Last month, we reported that in March, during the week of March 11th, we would have approximately a liquid cash flow position of $3 million. In this particular month now, you will see that dipping down to $2 million. It means that we have to remain disciplined in our spending habits. So again, just to keep an eye on that. If you go to the revenue summary, what you're going to, I'm sorry?
Yes.
There's some questions.
I question on the liquid cash flow. It appears that between the end of February and end of March, we dipped below zero.
I realize that, Commissioner Clark, and it's not actually at zero, it's at 2 million, but because of how the graph is depicted, so if we just add additional dollar amounts on the left-hand side, we'll make sure that that's corrected. So thank you for taking that observation, making that observation for us.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, it's approximately $2 million projected at that time in the period of, during the week of March 11th.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Vice
you.
President Elliott?
Yeah, I think we had this conversation before. Can't remember exactly when, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody in the district recognizes that at this point in February, that we're going to be at this place and not to spend any money or spend very little money during this time.
Correct.
Right?
And so in our cabinet meetings, in our staffing meetings, we continue to have the discussion, a very pointed discussion with regard to if an expenditure is brought forward, we're saying, how is it being funded? Everything that's being brought forward, we're saying, how are you funding that position if it's not identified? If it's an expenditure that's been requested, we're saying, how is that being funded because of this very fact? We don't have room to wiggle at that point in time.
But is that the right question to ask? How is it going to be funded as opposed to just saying, no, you can't get any money during this period?
I would say it depends on what it is, too, because, again, if we're dealing with a health and safety-related matter, which some of the expenditures more recently that weren't budgeted, and we did make those expenditures were tied to health, safety, and well-being, we found a way to fund them. We found something else that needed to go away so we could fund those expenditures.
Yeah, and I would be, I'm going to be very interested in seeing our claims report.
Absolutely.
During this period to see, you know, how the money was spent or lack thereof. We shouldn't see as much being reported to us from our claims vendor in this particular period as we have in previous periods.
I think what you're going to see, though, is that because of where we are, and I think the report is actually going to be presented tonight, when you see the trend for this month, we're still, we're just coming off of that high, if you will, from the spending, because school has to get started, everything has to get in place for school, and then we will start reducing. So now, going into December, we really should be shutting down on our spending, and we have absolutely told the buildings, the departments this year that the freeze in spending is February 25th. That means that it's not that people cannot, the buildings cannot order, you know, paper or toilet paper or paper towels or whatever. It's that there's a different process that has to be put in place to ensure it flows through proper channels if money is going to be expended.
It can't go over 2 million, in other words, during that period.
We have to stick directly to the budget, if not come in under budget, correct?
Yes.
Because again, this is all tied back into the SRSA reimbursement. And so because of the fact we're front loading, we have to be very careful that we're managing all the balls in the air, so to speak, juggling all the balls in the air. So if we move on to the revenue summary now.
Carlene, I'm sorry, before you move on, I just want to let the board know that in previews, I also said that perhaps that is the time frame between like January, end of March, where we do a freeze again, and we have had to implement freezes, especially when we had the deficit and we were trying to climb out of it, that would be the period to have a freeze in the district and only have necessary expenditures. And since we know about it now in December, and honestly, we knew about it a few months ago, we're looking at the chart, like this is the time for everyone, and the administration in particular, to plan accordingly so that we're not caught up in this zero market, if you will, you know, hitting that zero. Even though it's a 2 million, it's still a very low number, and 2 million goes very fast in this district.
All of the principals and building, all of the principals and budget directors of any department have already been informed that the freeze will be in place on February 25th. That gives the schools enough time to end their spending for the year. And again, it'll be strictly enforced from that point forward. It'll be the absolute freeze will be placed, and everything will be highly scrutinized. Every expenditure going through is highly scrutinized. Typically, you should not see anything other than health, safety, and well-being type of expenditures moving through. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to revenue. You're going to see an increase, as you read in the cover memo, that we are starting to see the recognition of the SRSA funds of the $39.6 million, so that was good news. We did have to make a budget. Again, when you're preparing your budget, you're working with the information that you know at the time. And so when we got the November numbers in, we realized that we needed to reduce our aid number by $6.6 million. And again, it's because we weren't sure of exactly what was happening with COVID. There were so many different variables. But we did reduce, we did make an adjustment to, we know we have an adjustment to be made of $6.6 million in our revenue. And so again, the budget is a two-part process. You take a look at your revenues and what's happening in your revenues, and you take a look at your expenditures. So immediately when we saw that we needed to make that adjustment, we said, okay, what's happening on the expenditure appropriation side? And we did see that we had significant reductions in our expenditure side as well. So it was a total complete wash. Actually, we're a little bit ahead. And with that said, then we are absolutely still in a balanced budget position, so no concerns to be raised with regard to that. When we take a look at the appropriations, which would be the next pages down, next sections down, what we saw there again is where, interestingly enough, the greatest reduction that we had was that our charter school tuition expenditure was actually down by $6.6 million. So again, it was interesting that it was a direct correlation there. But again, what that means, and you'll see it later on in the report, is that the charter school enrollment for the first time is showing a decline. Now, perhaps...
What'd you say?
I saw Commissioner Vice President Hill.
Oh, okay. Let me wait.
So we will take a look at that, but from what was projected to where we actually are, the charter school enrollment is down, so that gave us that buffer to help make up that difference. We also received an unexpected check in for our food service program. So where we had set aside, as Commissioner Powell had stated, set aside money for the food service program to make an interfund transfer from the general fund over to the food service fund. We don't have to move as much because we received $2 million that we were not anticipating to come in. So that reduces the obligation in the general fund to the food service fund. So I said a lot there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take those questions, or I would be happy as well just to continue on if we move through here. Continue, okay. So on pages 13 through 22, again, we have another 11 pages of budget transfers. We are, as I'm meeting with the principals and their secretaries and going out to the buildings and even talking with the departments and the heads of those departments, just asking them to please take a look at their budgets this year when they're putting their budgets together. Our goal is to greatly reduce budget transfers. To have 11 pages of budget transfers is not typical in a regular district. And so we need to take a look at how we're doing business and again to reduce those budget transfers. So we will be paying attention to that more intently this year. We do have one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so has there been training in the schools, or you've had conversations in the schools about this? What's been some of the reasons that we've had this level of budget transfers?
Because it's always been done that way. And that's what I'm trying to talk to people about, and I'm totally enjoying the time going out to the schools, I have to say, and meeting with people, because I think there was a hesitancy or a fear of moving away from something just because it has always been done that way. So what I talk to them about is put the money in the codes that you know you're going to need it to be in. If someone asks you a question, it's okay to say, but this is where I need the money this year. That's a legitimate response when there's at the budget time, at budget presentation time, if someone says your money is moved from this code to that code, it's the reality, it's what's needed. And then later on, that saves the secretary time, it saves the principal time, it saves the budget department time in not having to make all these budget transfers if we properly align it to begin with.
Does it only happen at the schools primarily, or?
No. There's other major transfers that occur. For instance, the substitute teacher line item is still a concern for us because money is still booked centrally that has to go out into the buildings. There are, the TAPU transfers still occur, meaning that when we are finally given the number of enrolled students per each building, we make sure we put the money into that building so that TAPU money, that allocation per pupil money, properly represents the number of children in that building. So those transfers will still occur.
Yeah, so we still have some transfers, but we could be more efficient with
Absolutely.
Okay,
we have a ways to go, and our executive director, Terry, is on it, and he's working with his team to help our buildings and the other department heads through the process.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. We did have one significant line item occurrence in the H fund that we wanted to bring to your attention. Again, nothing severe, but just to, because it fit the threshold. And that was an upgrade for Windows Server licensing of $240,000 with day automation. As I said previously, page 32 of your packet did include the charter school enrollment figures, so you have those. Yes.
Rebecca has her hand up, so she just messaged me. Rebecca?
Sorry, thank you. I had a question on the cash flow. If there is any type of extended shutdown because of COVID, how does that affect our cash flow? Does it affect our cash flow?
It would. And again, this is where we had those discussions last year because it could be a little bit confusing when we go through this. So, for instance, if we have if we do not have transportation expenditures we will not realize the transportation expenditures, but at the same time, then we'll have to do an adjustment for a reduction in the following year for transportation aid. So it all depends on who is determined to be necessary staff. There could be, again, we could go through what we did last year. If staffing is shifted to, for instance, rec centers, all of those same factors that we looked at last year, we would be saving in utility costs. That would reduce, again, certain payables. So there's a number of items that we would have to take a look at, just as we did last year, to see what that impact would be. Does that help you?
It does, thank you. I did have one other question, specifically about individual building and program budgets. I'd really like to see, because the transfers issue has been an issue for a while, and it's difficult to really understand without seeing what an actual individual school building's budget is and all of the pieces to it, what is causing these transfers. So if there's any way of making, it doesn't matter to me which program it is or how this comes about, but it would be really helpful to see how a budget is created, how funds are allocated, and that type of thing, so then we can better understand why things aren't budgeted correctly and how to lower the number of transfers by better understanding and with expectations of how things are budgeted within programs.
Right, and I don't want to say that something was budgeted incorrectly. I wouldn't want to imply that. When people are putting their budgets together, budget is a process, it's not a destination, as I always say, because of the fact that we put our budgets together with the best information that we have available to us at the time. And as time progresses, from the time the budget is approved to the actual start of school or into the fall after the school has been underway, there are legitimate reasons why transfers need to be made. One in particular could be moving money from a supply code, an instructional supply code, over to an equipment code. If if a printer breaks or something like that. So it's not to say that someone did something wrong. However, I think that with the implementation of the Balancing Act software that we'll be using and having community involvement in the budgeting process, that will help people gain an understanding as well as what does that look like when you're going through the budgeting process, what is actually available for the buildings and the departments to move, because I think you'll find it interesting how much is actually tied down in contractual obligations, meaning salaries and benefits, such as health insurance. So I think that that's going to be a good exercise that we go through this year. But I am happy to, again, offer any kind of professional development through the Finance Committee, whatever would be seen as valuable to people. Again, the more that we discuss and share with each other, the sharing of knowledge, the greater level of trust we build with each other. So that is all good, all good.
Yeah, the charter school report.
The charter school report, as I said, when you take a look at that, we're doing better than had planned. So you're seeing on the far right lower side, right there, that the variance from the projected to the budgeted is much preferable a place where we'd like to be this year as compared to last year. Say that. Okay. I think I also had, did you want me to do the activity funds now? Okay. So we did have the activity funds presented for you this evening. And with that, as you can well imagine, the school activities are, the clubs are really just getting up and underway. And so there was very little activity for this particular period because folks are just getting back to school. Clubs are just being reestablished. Advisors are being appointed. So again, there's very little activity, but you can be rest assured that will be going up as time goes on. Bless you. Is that, any questions on that? Okay. Would you like me to go into the introduction for the budget? Okay. So as you all know, when we have started out, even when I started with the district 4 years ago, going on 5 years ago now, there were many comments made with regard to our budget. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Carlene. So we have Naraki, they're waiting
I'm
to do
sorry.
their presentation. No, you're fine. And so I had you giving these reports, and then I was gonna switch it over to Naraki, then do the motion for the reports, and then I was gonna have you present on the budget book and the draft calendar. We were gonna have those discussions. So
Thank
I
you.
do apologize. I know that Carly just gave you the thumbs up, but I'm gonna ask you to hold off for 1 second and then ask our auditors claim organization to jump on.
Good evening, everyone. Nice
Good
to see you.
evening.
So I know we have our report to discuss. I'm Darren Acabelli, and Rich Patulli's here. He's supervisor that handles the day-to-day for you. Just as a matter of logistics, I believe our report's there. Is it on your screen, or do you need us to show it on our screen?
We have it on our screen.
Yeah, okay. Oh, great, perfect. So this is the report for November, and then within embedded in the report itself, there is exhibits with trend information. But I'll let Rich walk you through the report, and of course ask questions along the way.
All right, thank you, Darren, and thank you for having us here tonight. So tonight we are presenting our report for the month of November. In the month of November, we audited approximately 1,913 claims for the district. That total was approximately $46 million total. And during the month, we made observations into 270 claims, totaling approximately $3 million. There are currently 107 outstanding inquiries, totaling approximately $55,000. And that is, and as you can see on your screen, the detail from the different systems. So we audit both PeopleSoft, Concur Invoices, Concur Expenses, and P-Card transactions. A majority of the outstanding claims do reside in the P-Card transactions. Just so that the board is aware, the P-Card transactions do undergo a multi-level review process for each transaction. So the levels prior to our review weren't complete at the time that we were issuing this report. I don't have the current figures offhand, but the number of outstanding transactions in terms of P-cards today is probably.
And that was part of the issue that we were having. So what's the process now about, what do our schools have to do now in terms of requesting funding for different goods and services?
So as Carlene makes her way up, I'll start. Certainly, it involves some planning, right? And thinking about what you need. But there are emergencies that come up, and the principals work with their chiefs. And, at times we do grant those requests. But, we really, given where Carlene and I started with this process and looking at all of the P cards, we had a conversation and we said we have to really tighten it up. And so one, planning. Two, if there are emergencies, then, we do take a look at that if it's something that's needed, or we figure a process out to accommodate.
That pretty much says it. We actually, anytime that a P card is needed, because no other form of currency, if you will, or payment will be accepted, We do take it to the superintendent and ask her for permission. We will explain the reason as to why, and then we allow the transaction to occur.
So what's the turnaround time in some of those kinds of situations?
It can be very quickly a matter of hours. However, if it's a little bit more, maybe not even an hour in some cases. It all depends on, honestly, in the method of communication to us. In receiving over 200 emails on average per day, if it gets lost in my email, that's a detriment. If someone texts me or calls me, it's easier to respond to it than it is to try and find it later on in an email and realize that it was an urgent situation. If it becomes complex, saying, well, it was just a mistake made and now we're at the point where we have to use a P card, that takes a little bit different route too for retraining, but make sure that the transaction properly is accommodated. But it's very restricted at this point in time.
Thank you.
We are moving to the new platform, which is a much more secured platform, so more to come on that.
All right, thank you.
Add though that part of the reasons that we had to move in this direction was because we were cited for P cards as well in the audit reports and the state auditor as well, on how we had been allowing P cards kind of. I mean, there were some transactions that were like people were buying chargers for their own personal use, and those were not allowable expenditures. But you know, it's such a small thing, but it does add up when multiple people are doing it, and then we weren't always getting the receipts. And then when we had the internal claims auditor, like that was a hassle, but I see it's still coming up for for Naraki and P cards. So every time I hear P cards, it's like, I can't believe we haven't gotten it under control, but it sounds like it's getting better. So I want to uplift that. But, you know, it has come up multiple audits from the state around the P cards. So thank you to Naraki though. I think you guys have been doing an amazing job. And for those who don't know the history, I won't get into it tonight. However, I have definitely noticed a difference, not only in the reporting, but keeping things moving for us as a district, because there have been times where we were bottlenecked in some of these things, and they were causing other backlog expenditures and issues for us financially.
Thank you very much. It's been, the process has been working well with the team.
Thank you. Vice President, President White has a question for you guys.
No, a comment. I just wanted to reiterate and piggyback on what you just said, and I've said it before, but it can't be stated enough. I really do appreciate the work that Naraki has done. We had some really committed public servants, but I think this has added a level of experience to this very labor-intensive and specialized field, and I want to thank Naraki and our Auditor General for identifying them and bringing their experience to the table. It's really, it's a night and day experience. And again, I want to reiterate, we had some really committed public servants, but I think it is fair to say that Naraki's experience in this field has taken us to a different level. And as a consequence, I think most of us feel a lot more comfortable. And again, on behalf of the board, thank you for lending us your expertise.
You're very welcome, and you know, thanks for trusting us to you know, to help you through that. And like we said, everyone's been very great to work with and communicating, mostly with Rich directly, but you know, the communication back and forth issues and our questions get resolved timely, and you know, we think we're turning around questions coming to us on a timely basis, so it's been working well. So thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, I think, are you guys, I don't think there's any other additional questions, Naraki.
Okay, well, certainly send them to us if we don't talk to you until we get into 2022, and there's questions, always reach out.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, the next time we'll see you will be April, and I promise to have you present first and do this report at the finance meeting first. So thank you for waiting for us tonight.
All right, you're welcome. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too, and happy holidays to you and your families.
Happy holidays.
You as well.
Rochester. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now up next, I'm going to ask for a motion to forward the financial reports for consideration.
Seconded.
Okay, Kalia is pulling that up, but while Kalia pulls that up so that we can vote, we have a presentation on the budget book proposal from our CFO and our budget director. Oh, there it is. All those in favor? Aye.
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 And then we can vote. Okay, you ready? Thank you. All right, Carlene, the floor is yours again.
Okay, I just wanted to say that all of us have been dealing with the issue of the size of our budget book and the content of our budget book for a number of years. And as the media had one time quoted, a community member is stating it is like a 700-page novel with no storyline and no ending. And so we have taken that very much to heart. We want to make sure that the substance of the budget book is information that is easily understood and can be processed by individuals so that they could explain it as needed to others. And I just wanted to say that Executive Director Terry Hassler and one of our senior management analysts, Abby Clymer, have really taken the charge to heart this year when we were told to reimagine the way we do business, reimagine the way we are getting things done at RCSD. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry, and again, please keep in mind that when we started as a team, the budget book was in excess of 400 pages. Last year we were able to get it down to less than 300. I know that doesn't sound significant, but this year Terry and his team have taken it down even further. The content, the substance will still be there. We are considering this a 3-year process. Our goal is to model the Washington, D.C. Public School website and their budget process, their budget documents. So if you get a chance to take a look at that, that's the direction we're heading. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Terry and again thank him for the job he and his team have done.
Thank you, Carly. Good evening, President White, Commissioners, Superintendent Myers-Small, viewers at home, Clerk Wade, and my other members of the district present. First slide. So why a budget book redesign? Why are we doing this? The first reason is, as Carlene mentioned, readability of the book and making it a document that flows as you read it. Right now, the budget book is broken up into sections and segmented, and each section kind of stands on its own, and it doesn't quite flow into the next section. So our redesign was focused with all readers in mind: parents, students, administrators. Of course, the city is going to read it. New York State Ed is going to read it, and maybe even members of the media. The second reason for the redesign is the state monitor has put it in her plan that the budget book is a lengthy, cumbersome document, and we want to redesign it so that it is easier to read and fulfill that comment that the state monitor has in her plan. The current layout of the book is the slide that's being shown right now. We have 8 sections currently, and like I mentioned earlier, they are segmented into each in their own, and the book doesn't flow naturally as you look at the information from section to section. So one of the first changes that I want to mention is we want to do away with sections of the book and make it one cohesive document with a master table of contents in the beginning that will tell you where everything is. And so if you want to go find a very specific piece of information, that will all be in the beginning of the document, opposed to almost the tables of contents that we had in the beginning of each section. Next, major proposed updates. Bless you. We want to connect the budget book to our mission, vision, and core beliefs, our strategic objectives, and information on the foundation of the RCSD budget investments, and that is a lot of documents that we have associated with the district, our strategic plan, the state monitor's plans, our consent decree, excuse me. So we want to tie the book to those and make sure that we're fulfilling those obligations and following those plans as they've been written. Next slide. This is our proposed layout of the new budget book. Like I said, we want to start with an introduction that ties the book to the mission, vision, core beliefs, the foundation, and then the next section would be, or the next area, it would flow right into what used to be a section 3 in the book, where we have general fund appropriations and then the general fund revenues. Same thing with the special aid fund and then the school lunch fund. As you can see, the budget book now, our appropriations are actually all combined. They're not broken up by fund. So I think that as any of the stakeholders that I mentioned in the beginning would be reading this book, you would want to see appropriations in the general fund on their own and not combined with the rest of the funds. Then we would move into the school profiles, and we'll move, I'll get into those and the rest of the layout and the rest of the presentation. So, universal updates throughout the budget book. First, let's talk about FTEs, everybody's favorite topic during budget season. During my first and only year here so far, I've learned that FTEs is a very important, sensitive topic for all stakeholders. And as I read the budget book for the first time, I've been studying school finance as an auditor and a business official for 20 years, and it took me hours to get through the book to follow where all the FTEs were. So one of the proposals we're going to have is putting all the FTEs in one location, not having them on each separate page. So you can go to 3 pages in the budget book, and you can see where the FTEs are, what departments they're in, what schools they're in, what types of FTEs they are, so you don't have to thumb through the book looking for them. Second major change that we are suggesting is switching over to the uniform system of accounts. Our account structure is very close to it, but we don't currently organize our data in the budget book according to the uniform system of accounts. So that is what we are going to do for all financial pages throughout the budget book in all sections. The next couple slides is a crosswalk from what we had as the old sections, 1 through 8, and where some of the items are going to go and which items are actually going to stay in the book. When it comes to section 1, instruction and overview, a lot of that information is required to stay in the budget book. There's no real, that has to be there. It's going to be in the beginning. It's the transmittal letter, the introduction letter from Superintendent Myers-Small, our strategic plan. That's what I was saying. We're going to have a small budget at a glance tying those plans to the budget book in the beginning to get the reader in the same mind frame that we want them when they read the rest of the book. A few changes would be organizational charts will be available on the website, and the executive summary will be blended into that budget at a glance that I mentioned. Section 2, we want to, the one part of section 2 that we think should stay is the student enrollment data. Obviously that's very important. We're a school district. That's what it's all about, right? So that will stay in the book. collective bargaining information and our budget policies can be available on our website or upon request by anyone under FOIL. The old Section 3, that was like the district-wide budget summary. That's where we showed all of the appropriations and all the revenues. Like I mentioned earlier, the biggest change here, other than moving to the uniform system of accounts, is breaking out the funds by themselves, showing each fund sitting by itself, exclusive from the other ones. Another major change that was in this section is the grants descriptions. I went back and forth about this a lot when I thought about how to design this book, and the grant descriptions keep the reader from reading the document and it having flowing nicely. So I think grant descriptions are provided on a regular basis, it's my understanding, by Director Pecor to all stakeholders, and they can be available on the website. Moving on to Section 4. What is the school profiles of the budgets? This section is still going to stay the school profiles. We're still going to have a profile for every school and school program. But like I mentioned before, the FTEs are going to move up to the front and be all one inclusive area so you can see them at a glance. So if you're a stakeholder such as a parent and you want to read this document, you can not only see the FTEs that pertain to the school district, that the school building that your child goes to, but you can see it in comparison to the other buildings all on one page, and you don't have to flip between the pages. And of course, everything will be the uniform system of accounts. That those expenditures will change in how they're listed on that page, and we have a new layout for it. Section 5, this is one of the largest changes that we are going to make to the book. We want to eliminate the district department profile pages. What they do is, if you look at them closely, they lay out the appropriations of each department in 3 different ways. I'd like to consolidate that and lay it out in one uniform way without using budget codes, but using layman's terms that anybody can understand and what those expenditures are, and labeling them with personnel, supplies, contractual terms that people can follow and understand. And then, so what section, the old Section 5, we're going to flow into departments with 3 major charts. One being the appropriations for each department that pertain to FTEs, the appropriations that pertain to their operating budget, and then a 3rd chart with each of the department's total budget, which would just be adding the 2 lines from the 2 previous charts, coming to a total budget for each department. The old Section 6 referred to the EPO, East. Like to show move East. I mean, East is a school in our district, so we're going to put that with the other school districts, with the one caveat of leaving in that one introduction page that we have in there now that gives a little background on what East is, what it is. So that page isn't going to change, but they're not going to be their own section anymore. The old Section 7, district profiles and budgets. These are district-wide expenses that don't pertain to a specific department or school. Debt service, employee benefits, that area is not going to change very much. That's going to stay relatively the same. The old Section 8, appendixes. We are required to keep the New York State report card. That's not an option. but one of the things that we want to do throughout the budget book this year is put things in layman's terms and get rid of all acronyms.
Hallelujah.
Instead of having a glossary with acronyms, just spell them out. It's that, I think it's that easy. And then we're going to take the salaries over a certain threshold set by New York State. That requirement is of essential school districts. Big Five that's not a requirement of us, so we're going to make that available upon request, or maybe on the website, either one. And that concludes my presentation for tonight.
Commissioner Powell, do you have a question?
I really applaud the effort, and I wish you the very best of luck. The only concern I have is that much of the way the budget book looks today was dictated by City Hall. And although they're not very happy with what it looks like now either, each and every one of the components that has been a problem is because that the City Council has asked for it. So my ask of you is, or question first and then ask is, have you engaged with City Hall about this reconfiguration? And if so, what was their response? And if not, I just strongly encourage that it be part of what happens between now and when you present us the budget proposal in the spring.
To answer your question, no, we brought it before you first. You guys have that
Again,
right to
just,
see the book.
just absolutely, of course, but
Yeah.
just understand that much of what's in there was over time asked for by City Council or City Hall, and very often they don't really know what they need until they see it. So they might be perfectly happy with a more streamlined and more readable budget, but we can't know that until we begin the conversation with them. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something before I call on Vice President Elliott?
All I wanted to say is that we will follow up with City Hall. We wanted to start, just like as Terry said, we wanted to start.
Can you
with
speak on the
her.
mic? Thank you.
Yes, we wanted to start with you first and let you know what our plans were, what the goal was, the end goal. I think, too, that with the change in the mayor and the team at City Hall, that will have an impact as well. So we've also been working very closely with their finance team, building up a rapport, and I'm sure that they'll find this acceptable, but we will take it into them. So thank you for that comment.
Vice President Elliott.
I don't particularly like the change, and let me tell you why. I like the book being as big as it is because it provides us with, and it provides the community and researchers with information that is, to me, it was a comprehensive book. To Commissioner Powell's point, our book is somewhat aligned to City Hall's, and I think that if the sections are removed, it's just going to make it, to me, it may make it more cumbersome. The only problem I had with the current budget book is that we didn't specify the amount of money that each person in the district was making. There was an average amount. It was, let me back up. At one point, it was at the end of it, but that the FTEs did an amount of, $125,000 that this person would be making, when we knew that it was far more. So that was one of the issues that I had with the book. And, where we're moving some of this information to the website, it just may not be as accessible to our community. I can remember, because I ran on this, that there were no budget books available at the time, and that's when Manning Rivera was here. So for us to go to having the budget books, and now we're going to streamline. I don't know. I guess I'm not comfortable. Have to hear more about this. Right now, I don't like it that we're we're decreasing, because I just think it has so much information that our community would have access to. Maybe more people are using online, can get it online, but I'm not sure. You may not get criticism from people. I disagree with Dr. Jallo on this, and I also disagree with what the media says. I think the book was comprehensive, and even to remove something like the executive summary, that gives you, and again, as a researcher, when I was in school, I took the city's book and used the city's book and their executive summary. So, I'd like to hear more about it. Right now, I don't like it. I don't like that it's being changed, but I'd be interested in hearing more about how we're going to do this. I don't know how user-friendly it's going to be, and I don't know, you talk about a table of contents, but, the sections seem to be far more easy. And then, when you mention the EPO, that having a separate section, it could work. I'm just telling you, just off the bat right now, I just have some issues with it lacking the comprehensiveness of the completeness of the book. So I'll be interested in continuing to hear what you all are going to be doing.
Okay.
Yes. It's hard to judge the effort without really seeing it. We don't really know. I appreciate you all making the effort. I do agree with Vice President Elliott to a certain extent that the number of pages, it should not be judged by the number of pages. And I think some people looked and said, oh, it's just too big, it's too heavy, so it has less value than if it were streamlined. I think that's an assumption that isn't always correct. The Bible's pretty long, but it's pretty informative, right? So and again, I'm just trying to I appreciate you guys bringing this forward. This is the kind of dialogue that is necessary, right? So don't take offense to my comments. I'm giving you my first impression on a document that I have not seen. And my first comment would be that sometimes documents that are long aren't necessarily bad. They can contain a lot of information. I think, particularly with a district that has some of the issues that we have about transparency, more information sometimes could be more meaningful. The more immediate, but I'm not poo-pooing the effort. I just want to emphasize, I'm having the necessary dialogue in response to your presentation. But more specifically, I have some questions, and one is on Section 4, the school profiles and budgets. Part of the reason why the document the budget book was expansive, and then we even cut it down some. I don't want folks to not understand the history. We have worked over many years to make this document more responsive and more informative. I appreciate this effort, but I want folks to know this isn't the first time that we've tried to make this document effective. And, it is sort of grown and reduced in size over the years in response to that. And one of the things that we did in Section 4, and again, I can't see your final product, but one of the changes was we identified the performance of schools. So my first question is, will this section, new revised Section 4, include, like indicators of success or failure, attendance rates,
yes,
out-of-school suspensions, graduation rates? Just quick question, do you intend on that being included there? Because that was one of the improvements that we made many years ago in an effort like this one to try to make the document more transparent, more effective. Will that be included in Section 4?
That part is not changing.
Is it not
We're
changing?
not, yeah, we're not changing the information that we get about the student performance.
And I assume that would have been on that Section 4 page of your PowerPoint, right?
Right, I would have, yes, I would have mentioned it if I was taking.
Okay, is that how this is set up? If it's not mentioned, it's staying the same?
That's correct. Like on the school profile pages, we're not changing so much as we're changing the outlay. So a lot of the information is going to be the same. One of the items that is going to come off there is going to be the funding. It's going to be more based around the appropriations that the school is receiving. How much funding are they, like how many dollars are appropriated to that school? The information that you're talking about, that's staying on there.
So, okay, great. I appreciate that, and ours remains the same. The problem for those who have not looked at this document lately, they wouldn't know that. So for me, in future presentations, you might want to consider a presentation when you get closer to figuring out what that final version or recommendation is going to be like. You might want to reiterate or reintroduce in your PowerPoint those things that are still there. Because for me, that was a major change. You would think that would have always been in there. It wasn't. And this board had to fight for that a few years ago. So at some point, when you continue to have conversations with the board about this, I would suggest that your PowerPoint include those things that are still going to be there. The other question that I had is another change that we made. Again, people should understand the context. And while this effort is very much appreciated and there's always room for improvement, we've made many improvements to this document. And one of the changes that we made a few years ago was we said on the programmatic side, you hire a CBO to perform some kind of important function for the district. Well, years ago, we would just give out money like candy, and there would never be any assessment as to whether the particular program was working. Maybe we had a grant for $600,000, and we would give large organizations money and not have anything in the budget book about deliverables. Well, several years ago, we changed that so that the budget book, and this may have made the budget book a little bit longer, described in detail what the deliverables were, and whether those deliverables, this is a more recent adaptation, whether those deliverables were consistent with or in alignment with board goals and superintendent goals, and then whether the particular company delivered on those. So this might be a similar thing. It's still in there, and it's just not said there. But where would that be? Which section would that be in? And is that still in there?
President White, I don't recall that being in the budget book. Deliverables on specific vendors, is that what we're?
Yeah, so.
Like a specific contract that we have with
so,
another vendor?
I don't know if Commissioner Powell or somebody can help out with this, but we had as you know, very large contracts.
Oh, yeah.
And they purport to offer up services relating to suspensions or what have you. And there was versions of the budget, and I can tell you they were there, because at one point I said to Everton in one year, where is it? It was there last year, it's not there this year. Everton was your predecessor.
Yes.
So I know it's been there, and when for some reason it didn't show up, I would say that, and people would say, oh yeah, we're going to put it, and they put it in there. I argued then, and I will argue now, we have to stop being inconsistent with that. We need to, and I'm not saying you guys are not being, but we need to be very consistent on the fact that if we give people money, we have specific deliverables that are in alignment with our goals, and that they show us at the end of the budget year how they contributed to those goals. Is that in any particular section? Right now, as you sort of see the document, and if not, whether it was or wasn't in the past, how are we going to make sure, or the board has to make sure, I won't be here to have that dialogue, but I would strongly recommend that if we spend $1 million, $6 million, $600,000 on a particular investment, we should see a return on investment. The community should see that right in a budget.
We changed the budget process, the budget policy, actually, this past year, and that is a requirement within the budgeting policy now that each program is to be reviewed with the board in full by an evaluator to let us know who the vendor is, what services they're performing, and then whether or not they met that deliverable. So I believe that that's underway at this point in time. So it may not be included within the budget book per se, but you are due that evaluation as part of policy now.
But and I appreciate that, and I was aware of that, but my question is, right now in this version is not in the budget book.
I don't even think it was in last year, to be honest.
It probably was not.
Right.
It probably was not.
So, yeah, so, and I don't even know if it was the year before, I don't think it came to the final version. Maybe someone put it in a draft, but I think it was redacted for whatever reason. So no, we did not have that history. And perhaps that's why the policy was changed as well, so that it would be brought forward to you in a more formal report to the board.
Commissioner Powell.
The section that President White is referring to is in policy 6110. And it wasn't a contract by contract requirement. What it was is the district administration would define a program, whether it was after-school care, surround care, whether it was violence prevention, whatever, and provide for us in the budget book a set of measurables that was expected to be achieved from that program. And conceptually, it was so that the board could decide whether the funds that were being allocated were actually producing results. The new version, CFO Pierce is absolutely correct. The new version does call for it to be called out, President White, as a separate annual report to be delivered to the board before the end of each fiscal year. Just like its previous iteration with metrics embedded in the budget, the end of the fiscal year is too late to decide whether it's useful for the upcoming budget year. The timing isn't very helpful, but it's always been kind of one of those things that takes 2 full years, right? You initiate a program, you fund it through a budget, right? Maybe obviously you have goals and objectives and metrics to support that program, but the next budget has to be put together before you have any results, right? So it's always going to take 2 years before you even get results in order to determine how much to budget for. It's always going to be a guessing game for the first several years. And that was true in the old model. It will continue to be true as we migrate to an annual report prior to your fiscal year end. It's unfortunately the reality of programs. If we're looking for program-based budgeting, which is something we've been trying to do for more than a decade, is to get a handle on those programs and determine, are we funding exercises that are actually giving us results or not? That's the goal. The board's only objective. It's not, to say it's a good program or bad program. It's to determine whether those funds are being well spent. So that's all. Thanks.
Just one comment I want to make on some of, just a clarification. It's not about reducing the size of the budget book. It's about making the readability of the book appropriate for everybody, all stakeholders that have the book in their hands, and it's about a reorganization of the information. Yes, we are removing a couple things from the book, but the core of the budget is those items are staying in the book. They're just getting reorganized so they're easier to read by all. From New York State Ed, who are the experts, to a parent who wants to know how many dollars are going to their child's school.
Okay, Rebecca, our parent rep, has some questions.
Thank you. What was the city that you said you were mirroring the new version of the budget book on?
Washington, D.C. Public Schools.
Thank you. So in the section 3 that you talk about grants, there's always confusion about grants. So I'd request just revisiting a better way to maybe illustrate grants as opposed to removing it from the budget book, because it is such an important part. And I recognize it being available online, but it's so confusing that if there's a way to help the community better understand it. So did I get this? I think it was the first page of this, of section 3, the previous slide. So having at least some grant descriptions and explaining what they're being used for, I think is useful, because they are such an important part of the money that is spent by the district. But I guess that kind of brings me to like the most important thing is what type of community participation are you planning on for the layout and for the plan going forward?
Do you want to?
What we're going to do again is we are working with an entity called Balancing Act, and that was at the recommendation of Commissioner LeBron. This is a software program that actually has been used very successfully within the Syracuse City School District. And this allows individuals to let us know their opinions on various matters as it relates to the budget. We have, again, decided that we will not only provide this budget document, but then also a trifold, which will be very easy to extract the information. We will be soliciting the community's buy-in, but more importantly, with using Balancing Act, it's to address the major issues that we as a school district are facing and how the community would recommend that we address those issues, and working in partnership with the community, the unions, the parents, students, just overall community members, and get their feedback on what they would like to see included in the budget book and how the dollars are expended. So we will be getting more information in the next couple of months to make sure we get that information out to all the commissioners as how budget, the Balancing Act will work, how it will be rolled out, and that's how we're going to engage the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rebecca, did you have any other questions, or are you all set?
To be considered for the budget book. But as far as including CBOs in more detail so that we can understand the CBO partners for the pre-K programs that we have, I think would be really beneficial in this space. But that was all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carlene, did you want to respond to that, or she's make just a suggestion of CBOs and pre-K expenditures to be added or listed?
It's already included within the budget, within the special aid portion of the budget, but we can take a look at it to see.
If we can highlight it in a different way.
We'll see what we can do.
So I have a couple
Even
of...
something that was, oops, sorry.
Oh, go ahead,
Even
Rebecca.
something that was
No.
a little...
No, go ahead.
Something that was a little closer to the way the individual school programs are highlighted, because they are an important part of the education of our students. So it's it would be beneficial on a lot of levels to be able to see that in black and white. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of comments and just some feedback, and I did try to go to DC's budget. Actually can't find their budget book. So I do see their website. They have a trifold here, and I'll go through that just to look at it because I'm doing some research anyway on how other school districts are also creating like dashboards to show how those districts are spending their CRESA dollars and ARP dollars. So some districts have already put forth very transparent ways and others are not. New York State, not just Rochester City School District, New York State is not listed as one of the school districts as very transparent, or states as very transparent on how school districts are spending their dollars. But I do think that that's an opportunity for us to look at how some districts are being more transparent. But in particular to the budget book, a couple of things. One, I don't think we're gonna have a decision tonight. I just want to put that out there to you all because it is a lot of changes, and I would have preferred to have a sample and some cross-analysis visually to say, okay, this is what this looks like. These are the actual visual proposals or changes that we're looking versus just a PowerPoint, because even President White was like, we haven't looked at that document in a while. And he's right. It's not a document that we're looking at all the time. Some of us are a little bit more intimately familiar than others, but still having that visual comparison of like, here's where we're at, here's where we want to move to would have been great. I am going to ask that we consider a work session to only focus on this particular topic, perhaps when we come back in January after the new year. Because I don't want to hold you up, but I also want us to be very meticulous about how we make that decision and understanding what those changes are. The other piece, even around City Hall and City Council, I'm sure that over the years there were City Council members that made requests. Those folks are largely, majority have moved on. There's actually a lot of newer City Council members. Certainly, we can have that conversation with them even at 333 and start it there. The other piece, though, is that, just as a reminder, City Council's vote for our budget is symbolic. Legally, this board is the board that votes for the budget, and then we move forward. They actually don't have a legal vote on it's a symbolic vote that we've done. So I would be curious to see what City Council will say. Definitely, I'm having some meetings with them about other issues, but certainly can bring this up to them too, just to see where they're at. And I almost feel like they would welcome some changes, some better readability to our budget, because we do our budget and then they go right into their budget. And it is a lot for them to read and go through for both sides of the budget book. I will say now, what I don't support is us having the public ask for information. I would prefer that we even said, like the collective bargaining information, that's available online for folks and we just update it, versus available upon request, because who are they requesting it to, and who's going to make sure that those requests are responded to, and is it going to be a foilable thing? Like, I personally believe like this entire district belongs to the community, and none of us would be here, not our electeds, not the administration, none of you, if it was not for this community. So this is their information, and we should always make it as accessible to them as possible. So, I do want to support a more readable book, because it is a beast to go through. And even with folks who have finance backgrounds or have studied finance or mathematics, it is cumbersome to go through. So I felt your pain, because that's the pain I feel when I go through that book. However, I also, like Vice President Elliott said, I want the information. I want the information, again, to always be available to the public. So maybe not available upon request. Maybe we figure out ways to just have links online, do some training, do some even videos to explain to people, if you're looking for this, here's the links to click on, and some visuals on how we move forward. Also making sure it's signed, or at least if we're doing videos, that we have closed caption on it, and also in different languages. So I just want to uplift and highlight that. I also had a question about why removing the funding sources from the school budget profiles. I just always personally found some benefit to understanding how schools are funded, and where those sources of funding are coming from. I would not personally want to see the sources removed, but curious to see why you are making that recommendation.
Well, I'm making the recommendation because, A, the funding is provided to, as in finance, we have the grant side of things, and then we have the general fund side of things, and then we try to blend those together to figure out what the funding of a school is going to be. But it's all provided to that school district. So to have the funding source, I don't know why that would be so more important than knowing the dollars that are allocated to the school district or to the school building, and what those dollars and what those categories are. I think it's a better focus than where the dollars are coming from.
Yeah, so I'll just give you an example. Like, I like to know, how many Title I dollars are being spent in a school, so that I then look at how many staff are there, FTEs versus students versus these budget item lines. I mean, historically, I found that there's no real equitable formula. I know that there are different factors, like IEPs driving the cost, or senior staff driving the cost for a school. but I still personally like to understand, again, how these dollars are being distributed through those title dollars, if that makes sense. So, again, I'm going to recommend that we consider a work session that just focuses on this proposal that you have, with potentially like a sample of last year's book versus a sample of, and I don't think you need to make a bunch of copies. I think we can like move it around and share it, and even if we did it in 2 work sessions and we split commissioners, like 3 and 3, and then, or 2, 2 and 3 or something like that, to do it that way and collect feedback, and then have this conversation again early in the year so that we can move forward. I don't want to hold you up, but I also don't think we're going to be prepared to say yeah tonight. That's just my thinking, but I can ask where others are at on it. I just personally would not want to make this level of changes without seeing what you're talking about, because your presentation gives potentially all of us to have a different visual of what that outcome could be. The last thing I personally just want to add, because Carlene, our CFO, mentioned it, is participatory budgeting. So she mentioned Balancing Act. That is one of the companies that does participatory budgeting and does it with the Syracuse School District and also the city council there. So we will bring more information about that in greater detail to you all in the future. We're still in the process of having that, and I will say I did also even speak to our mayor-elect, who is also interested in doing participatory budgeting at City Hall, and then also figuring out how we can cross-collaborate to do some participatory budgeting with families and residents on both the budgets at the same time. We're nowhere near there yet. These are early onset conversations, but I do think there would be a huge benefit for us to create a participatory budgeting process for both entities so that our residents and our families and our students and our staff, this is going to be important too. I do believe our staff, and this is, you know, many people know this, a lot of our staff don't live in the city, and so there are ways that they can't participate and give input. This would be an opportunity for them to also share in real time with real data some feedback on some of the things that they believe we should be spending dollars or cutting back on versus the things we have historically come up with. So it's an exciting program. I'm very excited about it, and I do think it will change how we engage our community and how our community is able to give input into our budget. So I will present more on that in the future, in the very near future. But I don't know how you all feel about potential a work session in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, we can work with Kalia and the board members to kind of schedule around everyone's schedule, and try to knock this out by January so that we can let you all move forward with your proposal in a way that makes sense for everyone. Is feedback, Terry?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep, we can
Kalia?
develop an outline of what it would look like. And
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know how much help I can be, though.
Yeah, you're gonna be great. You're gonna be fine. Any additional questions? No? All right. Thank you both very much. And then next up is the budget calendar as we have these conversations.
And I will share.
You wanna talk about the
I'll
budget
pull it up-
calendar?
I'll pull it up for you so you can
Okay.
talk to it. There we go.
Okay. Oh, you're pulling it up?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so up first is we're going to talk about the budget calendar and budget development procedures presented for BOE for review. We just discussed that we're going to move forward with a work session in particular to this particular piece of the new budget development piece. Thursday, we're going to have the budget calendar presented for adoption, but essentially we can look at February 2022 to really start the process for the budget. So right now, it's proposed for Tuesday, February 15th for a presentation to the board on the budget forecast, budget assumptions, and alignment to the strategic and fiscal plan, and discussion of board priorities conducted in the Finance Committee. Any questions on that one in particular by anyone?
Commissioner.
Vice President Elliott.
LeBron, one of the things I'd like for this board to consider is, as opposed to the district giving us what the recommendation should be to the budget, we need to also include what we believe should be also included in this budget. And so if there is a date in which we can discuss what are some of the things that this board wants to see included in this budget, I think we should, if we can.
For the budget dates, for clarity, I'm asking for the budget dates or for the budget book?
For the budget process, that included in this process is an opportunity for the board to give its input in terms of what we believe some of the budget recommendations should be. Some of the priorities should be.
Yeah, so what we have is right now for Tuesday, February 15th, Vice President Elliott, I do have a discussion of board priorities to come up in the.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. I put it up there because I do believe in the past we've just done it so late in the process. And we had discussed this before, even when Terry was here. But I just want to add that when Terry was here, we did do budget priorities, and they still moved forward however they wanted to, and I did not support that budget. But I just want to put that out there that I will continue to not vote on the budget if it doesn't align with all the things. So I just want to put that out there. But they ended up doing it, and then guess what? We ended up with a cap because of some of the cuts that we did, especially in the bilingual and multilingual education department. So there's that. March 2022, Wednesday, March 2nd, the Finance Committee Chair will host a public budget webinar event via Zoom. We are still planning for Zoom right at this moment because of COVID, because of the variants. We don't know what the new year is going to bring. If COVID is gone by March, then we'll open it to an in-person session. That would be phenomenal. However, we do want to, have these conversations and start letting folks know that it is going to be largely on Zoom. On Tuesday, March 15th, have the budget due to the state monitor. Well, the administration will have to submit it to the state monitor for her review, and that is part of the state legislation and how it was written with the appointment of the monitor. So that is an extra piece that we have to do as a board, and the administration has to do because of that legislation. Also, that day is a special meeting convened as a Finance Committee meeting of the whole for the presentation of the district, and the East EPO superintendent presents their budget to the BOE. So it's a PowerPoint overview. And then the draft budget book and the CIP book presented the following meeting. Thursday, March 24th, the state monitor's presentation on the budget during the March business meeting. Again, this deadline is all dictated by state legislation and how it was written in the law when the appointment was happened. So we have to follow those, including the timeline. And that is required 45 days from the budget adoption. On 3/29, round 1 of the Board of Education questions are due by 5 p.m. to the administration. Our board clerk usually gives reminders to the board members around that date coming up so that questions could be submitted. And just so folks are aware, those questions are now public. Before, they used to be in a book. Only the board members saw them in the administration. Those are now posted online. So anyone in the community can see the questions that the Board of Education is asking and what the administration is responding. Thursday, March 31st, the deadline to provide the proposed budget, state monitor findings, and any budget amendments to the public via the district's website. Again, the deadline is in accordance to the state legislation, and it's required 7 days from the budget public hearings. In April, to be determined is a budget deliberation session. So that's the time for the board to ask the superintendent and the administration the questions, and we do those deliberations, and we keep going until we've exhausted those sections, if you will. But those dates are to be determined. We just know it'll be sometime in April.
They're
There's two.
Huh?
There's two of them.
Yeah, there's two. So there's also the administration has to respond to the board by 4/4 for the round 1 questions that we're asking 329. So I just want to uplift those dates now. I know we'll talk about this and everyone will get a copy of a finalized calendar, but it is a tight turnaround for us to submit and for the administration to respond back. So just want to make everyone aware that we will stick to that timeline for the BOE so that the administration can stick to their timeline to respond to us. And so there's another presentation, budget deliberations to be determined. Second round of questions due to the administration is going to be 4/8, is due at noon. And then 4:15, round 2, administration has to respond to the Board of Education questions by 5. Second deliberation, Thursday, April 7th, is the traditional public budget hearing. That's when we hear from the public, and folks will sign up. That will, again, most likely be on Zoom. But again, depending on where we're at with COVID. Tuesday, April 26th, the Finance Committee meeting and the budget deliberation sessions. 4/27 is round 3, Board of Education questions to the admin due at 5 p.m. Any questions on April so far? Okay. May, we have round 3, and this usually is the last round of questions that we, as the board members, send to the administration. Those are due the 2nd day of May. On Wednesday, May 4th, the board memo with a summary of the final board concerns are sent to the administration. On Monday, May 9th, or Thursday, May 12th, there's a special board meeting for budget adoption.
Can I just say
Yep.
why there's two? So our dates from the city are still pending. Usually by now we would have gotten it, but because of the transition of the administrations with the city, we have to wait until their budget team is in place before we can get dates. So right now, whereas in the past we would have had finalized dates to put on here, and that's why you're seeing so much TBD information, because typically we like as much as possible to have firm dates, but we're waiting until they're in place so that we can touch base with their team. And CFO Pierce will be coordinating, and once I get those dates, we'll come back again. We'll probably have to ask for the board to vote again to readopt. So, but for right now, we need some dates now to move forward.
Thank you for that clarification, because we do have a temporary interim mayor and an incoming mayor and some new city council members, and they also have to figure out their dates as well. But I do believe that the budget person, Chris, is staying the same, so we could probably hit him up after Malika's sworn in and ask him if he can expedite the dates a little bit as a priority. Tuesday, May 10th, or Friday, May 13th, the summary of the 22-23 RCSD budget transmittal and the final 22-23 budget is due to City Hall. Again, determinant on what dates that they pick. And TBT to be determined is the 22-23 RCSD budget due to City Hall. The date is always set by the city, at least 33 days before City Council's approval. In June, there's a joint budget hearing with RCSD and City Council at 3:30, and then a joint council board public hearing at 5:30 p.m. That date is also set by the city, and they host that public hearing. And then City Council's budget approval at 7:30 p.m., and the date is set by the city, so that's also to be determined in June. And then sections of the budget book that will be reviewed are still to be determined, especially determined on what we decide to do with the budget book and the proposal. Are there any questions? Yeah, do we want to, can I get a motion to move this?
Seconded.
I'm wondering if we want to do it now, and or Commissioner LeBron, because we got so many uncertain dates. Do we want to move this? What are you asking us a motion for?
To move this as is, and then once Malik is sworn in and he's had a chance to meet with his finance folks and dates that they're, that's how we kind of work backwards on some of our dates.
So do we need to make a motion for it now, or could we wait?
Yeah, because there's some dates on here that we know that we're going to move forward with. It's just that there's only a little bit of leeway. It could be Monday, May 9th, or May 12th, depending on what they move forward with in terms of dates. President White?
Yeah, I think it's fine for a framework. I mean, there are some
Yeah.
specific dates here, and to avoid us having to come back and revisit the whole process, I think this lays out a very decent way to proceed.
Thank you. So, okay. So
I had Commissioner Malloy second, but I don't know who did the.
I thought it was Vice President Elliott.
Oh,
That's what I
okay.
thought I heard.
Okay, all right, there we
it
go.
was one of these two.
Give me one.
Give it to Commissioner Clark. These are one
Give
of
it
his
to
last
Clark. It's one of
motions,
his
so
last
give
meetings.
it
Don't
to
take it from Clark. Thank you, Clark. All those in
Oh,
favor?
I'm sorry, aren't we open to discussion after the?
After the vote.
Oh, yeah.
Discussion.
Did you have a question?
Yes,
I
sir.
asked if folks had questions before we even.
I didn't hear a pause long enough to get a question. So I'm a little concerned about the description of the TBDs for board deliberation sessions. I don't understand. We don't need city council to tell us. What exactly are we waiting in to fill in those TBDs?
So those ones are with regard to so because of the fact that the budget book hasn't been established and the sections of the budget book, last year, the budget deliberations were based on the sections, and then based on that, we were able to plug them into the different committee meetings, kind of align everything together. So unfortunately, there's like a ripple effect based on several decisions that needs to be made.
Oh, you're saying that because last year we somehow meshed it in with committee work?
Committee, yeah.
All I would argue is, and I don't mean it in a loaded sense, but advocate for, is that that we just pick dates and, and on a Tuesday and worry about where the parts fit later, I would rather have solid dates there before we, in fact, if something could be worked up between now and Thursday, I'd be fine with it, but I can't vote for something with TBDs where we have the control over the dates. That doesn't make sense to me.
I can, oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. President White?
Yeah, while I appreciate your concern, Commissioner Powell, and it's always better to be definitive when you can, I think this is, as I said previously, this is a pretty solid framework. And the dates can be filled in, and without, you're right, the approval of City Hall. But even then, assuming that argument is correct, and I think it is, that means we can fill them in at some other time, largely, surrounding around our commitments and our availability, if in fact you're right. So my vote is supporting a very clear framework where a good number of the dates are provided, and it allows our teams internally to begin to understand what they need to do and when they need to have it done by. I would prefer to have that than not have our internal teams know where they need to go and when they need to get stuff done. And if I could, I just want to add one other comment, because I think it's important. Commissioner LeBron, I appreciate your leadership on this issue, on this process, but I also want to recognize the administration. Obviously, this could not have been put together without their assistance, and one of the last few times I will have the opportunity to do this, I want to thank district staff. I know our clerk does a lot of work and to make sure that we stay on task, and that's another reason behind my vote. People at this dais and to my left and in front of me put a lot of work to put this together, and by my vote, I want to support that. But again, I want to thank Ms. Wade for your availability to do a lot of this stuff and keep us on task, because we really wouldn't be able to do this kind of work without you. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, can we split the baby? Can we have some proposed dates available for us on Thursday, and so that we can amend the timetable based on our best input on dates for Thursday? I see the clerk thinks it's possible.
Yeah, but I'm ready to vote on it today, and I think I have the votes. But I also just want to say there's a motion on the floor.
And I'm not
So-
offering, and I'm not suggesting that needs to change. I'm suggesting that the clerk is fully able to provide us dates on Thursday, and that it could be amended on Thursday.
You're asking for 2 amendments, it would be Thursday and then in January.
Sure.
I'm not gonna support 2 amendments. I'm okay with where it's at right now, so can I move forward with the votes? I'm gonna ask legal.
Yes, you can.
I'll call him. Oh, President White?
Yeah, I am going to vote in favor of this framework, which again has an overwhelming number of specific dates, but to Commissioner Powell's attention, although there is not an amendment on the floor today, and you're not proposing that on Thursday, if the clerk is able to come up with some dates, and the parties present who worked on this, I had an opportunity to review those dates, I would certainly vote in favor of that on Tuesday, but that's not really before us now. And again, I intend, and Commissioner Powell, I think that would be wise. The sooner we get the dates filled in, the better. But between today and Thursday, perhaps people can figure that out. If they do, and they can, I would vote for that. But today, I intend on voting on this framework. So I hope that responds to your proposal in terms of my perspective. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. So all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is there going to be a
Commissioner Adams?
Aye. Aye.
Oh, thanks.
He said aye, yeah.
Are we voting electronically?
Yeah, yes, the
Yeah.
online vote is available.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and that concludes the meeting. I do have to say that we do have to go into board, the board has to go into an executive session, and we are going into an executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment of a specific individual and/or to discuss matters of concerns with the general counsel.
I make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and that concludes the finance meeting. Thank you.
Do we do the poll before or after?
I'm sorry?
We have to use the conference room here.
Yes, so just really quickly. To return, we will adjourn the meeting directly after, or you can call for the motion to adjourn the finance meeting now if you would prefer.
Madam Chairperson, before you do that, real quick, one of our members experienced a birthday this week. I don't know how old she is, and I'm not going to ask, but 18, is that how it is? Commissioner Malloy is her birthday, so I wanted to wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Do you want me to convene now?
Before everyone moves
So
away,
we're going to
can I
convene
just
the
have a
finance
motion?
meeting now, since we're going into
Yeah, I just
executive
need a
session and we
motion
don't
to-
have to reconvene to vote on anything.
Yeah.
So can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And Commissioner Adams said aye.
Are we, Kaya, are we going over here or downstairs? Okay.